Yeah, Omar.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone. It's just 6:30. This is Omar Passons. I'm with the City of San Jose. You're joining a community meeting to hear more about a potential proposed interim housing related to efforts that the city is making to address unsheltered homelessness. We're going to get started in just a moment. I wanted to mention a couple things up front. The first is that we are being recorded, so that if that's an issue or concern, you can sign off, but we really want to make sure that this presentation is available to the public even after today. The other thing is there are a collection of interpreters. It's a core approach for equity and just a value of the city of San Jose to make sure that we have access to language that so people can hear and participate in the language that they are most comfortable in terms of understanding. And so we have 3 language interpreters, and I'm going to ask them one after the other just to let folks know what language is available and then how to access the translation. So if we'll start with the Vietnamese interpreter.
Thưa quý vị, tôi là thông dịch viên người Việt, tên tôi là Quý, cùng với bạn đồng nghiệp của tôi là Phương Anh. Chúng tôi có phương tiện chuyển ngữ sang tiếng Việt. Nếu quý vị nào muốn nghe tiếng Việt của chúng tôi, xin quý vị chứ bạn lên và ấn vào cái chữ tiếng Việt, quý vị có thể nghe được. Chúng tôi trình bày bằng tiếng Việt và dịch tất cả cho quý vị. Xin cảm ơn.
Thank you very much for that. Now we'll go to the Spanish language interpreter.
Buenas noches. El día de hoy contamos con interpretación en 3 idiomas, vietnamita, español y coreano. Para habilitar la interpretación es necesario ir a la barra de tareas en donde dice interpretación. Es un icono de globo terráqueo. Simplemente hay que hacer clic ahí y hay que activar el idioma que ustedes desean escuchar y posteriormente silenciar audio original si es que no desean escuchar el audio original. Gracias.
Thank you very much. And then we'll go to the Korean interpreter.
네, 안녕하십니까. 산호세 집이 없는 분들을 위한 문제들을 해결하기 위해서 이제 시에서 이렇게 모임을 가지는데 여러분들을 환영합니다. 한국 통역이 필요하시면은 맨 밑에 지구본이 있는데요. 거기서 한국말을 클릭해 주시면은 한국말로 동시 통역의 서비스를 드릴 수가 있습니다. 그리고 본인의 그 음소 제거를 뮤트를 꼭 해주시기 바랍니다. 감사합니다. 일단
Thank you very much for that. Just a reset. Again, my name is Omar Passons. I'm Deputy City Manager with the City of San Jose. I'm joined by our colleagues in the City Manager's office, Jim Orpal, who is the head of special projects and driving our production of some of the important work that we're doing around trying to help get to urgent solutions to help people get off the street and out of homelessness. We're also joined by Emery Brandt and Sudha Kamath from the city manager's office. And we're actually also joined by a colleague from Valley Water who owns the property that we'll be talking about. And so Jen Cody, and thank you very much for joining. There is a host of folks that are also here. Thank you for coming. The way that this is going to work is first we're going to go to a couple of our elected leaders, Councilmember Foley and Mayor Mahan, give them a chance to say a few remarks, and then just so you understand how the presentation will work, there'll be a short portion at the start, probably about 10 to 15 minutes, that is just to get everybody a common set of information and introduce the proposal, give you some background. And then most of the time will be spent really just listening to your comments and questions. We know that this can be a challenging subject. People have lots of different views, and that's okay. What we really want to try to ask 2 things. One is that you respect that it's maybe true that your neighbor or one of your friends or colleagues may have slightly differing views from yours. And so I think we can all sort of appreciate the difference and allow people their chance to say whatever their perspective is. And also, if you can try to be direct when we get to the person and try to limit to 1 to 2 minutes when you're speaking. We just want to give everybody a chance. This will not be the only chance to have a conversation about this. It's just the sort of first of many. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Councilmember Foley to say some remarks, and then we'll keep going from there. So thank you, everybody. Councilmember Foley.
Omar, can I start the interpretation channels first?
Yes, please. I didn't realize. I'm glad you said that. So just 1 second while the interpretation channels are moving. Again, my name is Omar Passons. I'm with the City of San Jose. We're here as part of a community meeting. We wanted to make sure as many people as possible had access. And so we're doing this via Zoom. It is not the only opportunity folks will have, but just as I mentioned this earlier, and we'll mention this a few more times, know that both this recording in its entirety and the presentation that we'll do will be made publicly available on the website, and we'll share that link around after this meeting. But just wanted to let people know we really want to make sure there's opportunity. So with that, let's go ahead with Councilmember Foley. Oh, sorry, Councilmember. Are we having some challenges with the getting folks into the rooms, Sudha?
No, it has started. We should see a globe now.
Okay. So then for folks who need the interpretation, you can just click on the bottom where there's a globe and select the language of preference. So let's go ahead and please mute yourself if you're not speaking so that there's not background noise. And Councilmember Foley, the floor is yours.
Very good. Thank you, Omar. And thank you everyone who is taking time out of your evening to listen to this presentation. I am, as Omar said, I'm Councilmember Pam Foley, and I represent the district that this proposal is located in, District 9. We're here tonight to listen to a presentation to discuss a potential interim housing development in District 9. This is our first meeting to hear about the proposed development, and we are here to learn, and that includes me. Interim housing plays a crucial role in addressing homelessness. It serves as a bridge between emergency shelter and permanent housing, providing individuals with a stable environment while they work on finding a more permanent solution. In 2021, as part of Mayor Liccardo's approved budget message, the city committed to 1,000 transitional housing units. The city manager's office has been working with each of the council members, searching for feasible locations within each council district so that we can all share in the responsibility of reducing homelessness citywide. Through this commitment, along with utilizing the policies and ordinances broadly categorized as the 3 Ps, production, preservation, and protection, we have slowly reduced the number of people entering homelessness. For example, for every person we housed previously, 3 more would become homeless. Now that number has been reduced to every 1 person becoming unhoused. Only 1.7 people are entering homelessness. I am also incredibly thankful for the continued partnership with Valley Water, as this is a Valley Water project site, and as we continue to address this humanitarian crisis that we face. I'm not going to go into tremendous detail because you're going to hear that from the experts in this Zoom call, but I just wanted to indicate that I was very grateful that Mayor Mahan appointed me as co-chair of the Homeless Task Force or Transition Team earlier this year to focus on 2 areas related to homelessness. Number 1, we were to focus on reducing the number of unhoused who live on our streets or in our creeks. And number 2, to reduce the impact to the unhoused on the neighborhood communities. So with that, and in the mayor's budget message, it included many of the proposals that the transition team came up with. And now the new budget message has been submitted. The city manager's budget message has been released just today with additional information. With that, I want to thank you all for coming. I look forward to sitting back and listening to the presentation and learning myself, but I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Mayor Matt Mahan, who has joined us for this presentation. Thank you, Mayor. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Councilmember Foley. Great to be here with you all. I just wanted to take a few minutes to offer a little bit of context and share why we're having this conversation and how it fits into a larger strategy for ending homelessness. I want to thank Councilmember Foley for really rolling up her sleeves and working with me and others on the council and city staff like Omar Passons to find solutions. Look, the bottom line is this. I'm not going to sugarcoat any of this. We have a crisis. You've told us over and over again, number one concern in our community is homelessness and specifically street homelessness. We have 5,000 people living outside in our city at any given time, and it's a disaster for all of us. It's terrible for those who are living outside. We're getting bad outcomes for them. Their situations get worse. And we see, of course, blight and noise pollution and yes, in some cases, crime. And it's a real impact on our neighborhoods and small businesses. And, you know, my goal is to chart an effective course to ending street homelessness. It is possible. There are cities in our country like Boston that have the same amount of homelessness per capita as we have, but have street homelessness in the low single digits. Now, of course, they have something we don't that forces them to solve the problem. They have harsh winters. And what that harsh winter does is it forces them to build shelter and treatment centers and basic housing for people. And people have to come inside because it's too darn cold to live outside in the winter in Boston. I've lived there and I can tell you that firsthand experience. What we lack in California is the political will to create the places for people to go and then to require that people come inside. And I'm speaking just for myself here. This is not necessarily council policy at this point, but my goal and the reason I so support these kinds of projects is to scale up basic but dignified shelter and basic housing for people who need it, inpatient treatment centers for people who need it, and then require that people come inside. The reality, I don't have to repeat this probably, but I'm going to for emphasis. Our homeless neighbors are already living in the neighborhoods. They're already living along the creek. I'm out there all the time talking to them. We're doing cleanups in our encampments. They're there. The question is how we're going to get them to a better place and on a path to something better. And what we have found, I want to just share this data with you very quickly, and then I'll be quiet and we'll move on to the official staff presentation here. We have now stood up 6 interim or what you might call transitional housing sites. These are typically communities of 80 to 150 people with on-site services, on-site security. Yes, there are rules. And what we find is that over the last 3 years, as we've had over 1,000 people move out of encampments and into these sites, over 70% have remained housed. A majority have graduated to permanent housing, often by self-resolving. We get them stabilized, we get them treatment, we get them job training and job placement, and people are finding pathways to stable housing and greater levels of self-sufficiency. And here's the really important part, and it's common sense, but it may not seem like it at first blush. In the neighborhoods in which we have built these sites, calls for service for crime and for blight, so trash and graffiti, have gone down because we get the folks in that area into housing with security and with services, and we graduate them to something better. And I am a big believer, I'll end on this point. I think it's critically important, and I believe your council supports the idea that when we build these sites, we must ensure that the areas where they're built are made better, not worse off. And that's my commitment, is anywhere in this city where we build a site to help solve our homelessness crisis, it's already there, it's in the neighborhoods, it's unmanaged. When we build sites to bring people into managed environments to end homelessness, we're going to make sure that neighborhood's better off, not worse. And that's what we've been seeing so far with these sites. So there's no free lunch. I understand the only thing people seem to dislike more than homelessness are the solutions to homelessness. So it's a tough conversation. We're going to have to all work through it together. But we've already built 6 of these in other parts of the city, and they're working incredibly well. And it's maybe the one thing we're doing that's really working at scale right now. So I wanted to put in the framing for why I think this is the kind of solution that can help us turn the corner on homelessness. And I'm going to keep fighting for fair share policies so that other neighboring cities are doing the same thing. But I think the staff will walk you through it, but I think it's a very promising approach if we want to end homelessness. And at the end of the day, it's going to be our choice because there's no really freezing cold winter to force us to do it differently. So that's some high level framing. Omar, I'll, I guess, hand it back to you. And I apologize that I have to jump to a meeting at 7 o'clock, but I'll hang out for a little bit to listen. Thank you all for having me.
Thank you, Mayor Mahan, and thank you, Councilmember Foley, and your teams. Just to level set again for those who may have joined in the process. So this is a community meeting where we're going to do a short presentation. Generally, we condense the part where we as city staff talk, and we will let you as community members ask questions and probe a little bit. The meeting is currently set to go to 7:30. If we get into the Q&A, and it looks like we've got more questions, we'll hang out a bit longer. So I don't want folks to feel too worried about the timing. As a reminder to everybody, we will be posting this video recording and the slide deck that we're about to show on the on a city web page that we'll make available. It'll probably take a few days just for all the background logistics and such. But with that, I want to go ahead and get started so that you have a real understanding. It's maybe 10 to 15 minutes of listening to me, and then we'll get to really hearing from you. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. This is always the diciest part of this this thing. So hopefully, if we did this right, you should be looking at a screen. I see Suda's head nodding. Thank you, Suda. So I already introduced. Hang on a second. There we go. So I already introduced myself again. Omar Parsons. I'm a deputy city manager with the city of San Jose. I was hired last June, so I'm new, and this is a good opportunity for me to continue to learn and get to know my new community and understand what the issues really are. I have spent time in the encampments in the areas and on the property that we're going to talk about today. I am getting to learn and get to know community members and get to know the neighborhoods. It's necessary for government bureaucrats to sort of also get in and really understand. So I want to run through what we're going to do today over the next 15 minutes. A quick background so that we all have a common understanding of the size of the issues, some of the work that is currently being done to try to address issues around our homelessness crisis, and what we're doing to help people. Some of those citywide efforts that have been happening and will continue to move forward. We'll explain, my colleague Jim Orpal will help us really understand what emergency interim housing is, how it exists. We'll see a short, about a 1-minute video that you can see and hear from people in their own words, insights that are currently full and currently in use, as Mayor Mahan alluded to, in our city right now. Then we'll talk about the specifics of this what we'll call the Cherry Avenue option. It's on a Valley Water property. We'll talk about that a little bit. We'll explain both what the interim housing site is and what the purpose of the proposed associated water resource protection zone. There's some very sensitive environmental areas adjacent to that. We want to explain why that is a uniqueness of this area, and then we'll go into Q&A and dialogue. The thing I want to stress at the outset is that our work is about helping people who are unhoused, helping communities of people who may have housing. It is not about demonizing or criminalizing or hurting anyone. It's we all need to eat. And if you have a home, you use a stove. If you don't have a home, you may have to find a way to warm food up outside, right? We all have to use the restroom. If you have a home, you use the restroom. If you don't, you have to come to other ways. Part of what we're doing here is creating dignified, individualized, trauma-informed, and informed by people who live outside places where they can be. So let's get into this a little bit more. We get asked quite a bit, how big is this issue? And as the mayor mentioned, there are nearly 5,000 people who live outside on our streets, in our creeks, on our roadways. You're also considered living outside if you live in a car or an RV that's not part of a legal sort of RV site. So that's a pretty substantial challenge that we're grappling with. What we often get asked is, well, is there even a plan? And the reality is, it's useful for folks to know that our region, the city of San Jose, Santa Clara County, a backbone, a nonprofit and in Destination Home, and the Santa Clara County Housing Authority. They have all come together over the last several years with business leaders and nonprofit leaders and labor leaders and people with lived experience of being on the streets, and developed a community plan to end homelessness. And it has 3 core strategies that I put on the screen. As a reminder for those who may be coming in, my name is Omar Passons. I'm with the City of San Jose. We are talking at the moment about some of the background. We will get to the proposed location in your community shortly. We've got about another 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions. So we just want to level set. Today, although strategy 1 looks at those root causes, right? We get that question a lot. Do we look at root causes? The community plan to end homelessness does focus on those really sort of core prevention issues. It also looks at the housing programs necessary to meet the need. And then this 3rd strategy is really a lot of where we are now in tonight's presentation, in this conversation. Improving quality of life for unsheltered individuals, that is people who are living outside, and creating healthy neighborhoods for all. Living in an encampment outside is not healthy for a person who's in an encampment. It's not healthy for the community around the person living in an encampment. And so we want to do something about that. We also often get asked, well, okay, so you've got a plan. What's actually happening? And these next 2 slides are really meant to just give you an overview. Again, we're just doing some background, but over the time of this plan, nearly 10,000 people have been housed, right? That's a lot of people. And even though this statistic that's on the screen right now is a regional statistic, it's all of Santa Clara County, I want to make a special point. 84% of those people, even though it's regional, have a San Jose affiliation. That means that San Jose is really benefiting from the work of that supportive housing system, our elected leaders pushing for solutions, and working together in a concerted way. Now, this next slide gets at something that Councilmember Foley alluded to in her opening remarks, right? She said, well, there's all these people who are getting into housing. Why does it feel this way on the street, right? Why do I see people suffering so much, right? And the reality is that although this slide presents 2 pictures, one is it used to be the case that for every 1 person that we helped get from the street into some housing, 2.5 more people came behind them, unfortunately, and into homelessness. The more recent data that just came out for last year shows that for every 1 person who's exiting homelessness, only 1.7, a lower number than the previous one, are entering homelessness. I think that what you can see is 2 things. 1, that rate is coming down, but 2, it's still lopsided. It's still too many people becoming like losing their homes. And that's why it doesn't feel maybe for a lot of folks what we really want, which is everybody really wants that number to be below 1 to 1 so that we're actually seeing it go down. This is included, it's just a quick success comparison. You heard Councilmember Foley, you heard Mayor Mahan talk about the different strategies, the mayor's budget message and the the proposed budget that Councilmember Foley mentioned that was posted today reference increasing prevention. You can see on this slide, there's a 96.6% success rate for people who get help before they're going to experience homelessness, stay off the street. And then on the other end, you can see in the solutions, we get people into permanent housing and they stay there. And I can tell you from having overseen programs and staff who works with the most sick, the most in need of behavioral health care and mental health care and physical health care, that even for people with significant health concerns, you get them in a place where they can live, you get supportive services that they need, and over 95% of the time, they remain there and are successful. And then the piece that we're talking about today, that sort of crisis response, as Mayor Mahan alluded to, we have developed a system that is distributed across the city, where we know that having listened to people who are experiencing homelessness and iterated and improved the system, that over 70% of the people that enter our emergency interim housing remain either permanently or temporarily housed. Now we're about to pivot, and I'm going to pass it over to my colleague in just a second here, but I want to remind folks of a couple of things. One, this is an issue, as Mayor Mahan said, that is all over our city. There are people suffering in every community. Two, we're really talking about shared solutions that we can all be a part of, regardless of where we are in the community. And three, and I'll go to this next slide, the supply of these units of emergency and transitional and temporary housing is distributed, but you can see by this map that most of those current things or current units are in the sort of center of the city. So our mayor and council have said, we need these solutions everywhere. And so we want to let you know that our team focuses in all of our city. What I'll do now is pass it to my colleague, Jim Ortball, to sort of take us through our emergency interim housing program. And just to level set, Jim, before you get started, for those that are joining late, this recording, this whole presentation, all the questions and answers will be added in recording to the website. We will put the PowerPoint presentation slides as well, so you can download them and share with your friends. We'll have other opportunities to ask questions. We have probably about 10 more minutes, maybe a little bit less than 7 more minutes, and then we'll go to Q&A. So I'm going to move on, and Jim, go ahead.
Great, thank you, Omar. Now that we have some background, I want to share information about what we're considering, how we got to this potential site for consideration, and also have our colleague from Valley Water share some important environmental sensitivities about this area before returning to the Q&A. So if you go to the next slide, please. So I've been directly involved in the efforts to evaluate sites and participate in ensuring quality construction and direct support in these facilities once they open. With our housing department, I've given tours at the existing sites and am personally familiar with them and the services they offer. The interim housing communities are clean, quiet, and well-maintained. They're supportive for people who are in search of stability and reliable housing. They're safe places to rest, get services, connect to healthcare and job opportunities, and more. So next slide, please. Omar mentioned our regional community plan to end homelessness earlier. It sets aggressive targets to prevent and end homelessness. The plan's targets are to double the temporary housing and shelter capacity to reduce the number of people sleeping outside on our streets and in our creeks. These efforts that we're talking about tonight align directly with that plan. Our goal, as directed by our mayor and city council, is to get 1,000 new beds into our system in this phase of our effort. You know, it would be nice for all of us if we could go on a tour and kind of see these facilities. I think once people see them, they get a much better appreciation for them. Obviously, we can't do that tonight, but what we think maybe could help a little bit, we're going to show a short 60-second video that hears from people who live in them, kind of gives you a little video tour of them. And so, Omar, if you'd play that video, I think we can go from there.
Give me a thumbs up if the sound comes to you.
Oh, I was so happy. I was so happy because it's a room, there's a bed, showers, laundry.
You know, for me, it's been great because I feel they're real helpful. If you ask them a question, they'll lead you the right way.
This place is amazing because it has given me the opportunity to do all the things as a mother should be doing. I mean, I wish everybody appreciated it as much as I do. We have a home.
It gives me hope, so I can actually focus on my future education and what my career is going to be, besides looking at where my housing is.
Great, thanks for playing that, Omar. If you could go to the next slide. Yeah, I'm going to talk about how we go about identifying potential sites. So the mayor and council directed our city staff to site and develop emergency interim housing communities in all 10 city council districts, so across the entire city. So far, we've cited communities and we have them up and running in districts 2, 3, 6, and 7. And in fact, some districts have multiple emergency interim housing communities. And we're working with property owners in District 4 and 10 as we speak And we continue to look in the remaining districts, including District 9, which we're talking about tonight. To be good stewards of taxpayer money, we look for sites large enough to include about 100 units, which we have seen from existing experiences is manageable for our operator and it's manageable for the people who live in the sites. This allows the substantial investment we need to make to have good return in terms of the number of people we can help get off the streets and serve each year. The goal is to help people get into interim housing and then support them on a continued journey to a permanent housing option. Sometimes that's reconnecting with family. Sometimes it's with a roommate. Sometimes it's to permanently subsidize apartment with supportive services. Every person's needs are unique and different, and our teams and service providers work to have solutions that are right for each person. We all know from experience, it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all approach. We look for willing property owners to help us site emergency interim housing because as we all know, this is a crisis and we need to move with a sense of urgency, and having willing partners helps tremendously. We started by evaluating, a number of years back, city-owned property and have included a number of city-owned properties in the process. Now we're on to working with other property owners because we really don't have many or any other city properties. We also look at the benefits and challenges of a particular location. Sometimes the geography or other constraints make a site less ideal than others. Sometimes there are environmental or other considerations that we need to account for, like an adjacent water resource that may need protection, which we'll be talking about shortly. There is no one-size-fits-all approach for selecting sites either, because each property is unique. We consider many factors to determine if a site is feasible, and then viable, can we actually construct something, and then ultimately practical on a number of different fronts. With this overview, let's turn to the specific Cherry Avenue site we're considering here, and we want to get your input about. So if we go to the next slide. So this is a map of the area we're going to discuss. It's under consideration as a possible emergency interim housing community. We will explain more, but just to orient those who may not be aware, this is a Valley Water owned property along if somebody could just, if you could move his, thank you. Yeah. Along Cherry Avenue, across the street from the Bass Pro Shop, which is in the Almaden Ranch Shopping Center. So next slide, please. This map provides more of an aerial of the proposed location in orange. You can see that's the specific site that we're talking about. And then the potential water resources protection zone in green. Our colleague from Valley Water will help further explain the value of the water resource protection zone shortly, but in general, because of the sensitive nature of the area around this site and the range of federal and state requirements, there is a need to protect the environment around this site on an ongoing basis. So next slide, please. So this is a mock-up of how the layout could look. It's an early concept. There are still many steps to engage in. Our city's housing department commissioned a study to review what has been successful at various other bridge, emergency, and interim housing communities to determine kind of what the ultimate site design and the best way to approach supporting people in these locations, and to make sure it kind of matches up with the surrounding area as well. We provide this sample as a way for city staff to determine if it's a viable site and to help all of us, including the community, start visualizing what may be entailed. So now I'd like to turn it over to Jen Codian of Valley Water to share some insights about the Water Resources Protection Zone, which is proposed adjacent to this interim community. The Water Resources Protection Zone would be an area that would prohibit any uses that are harmful to the environment, including camping, cooking, discharging items into the water, and so forth. We're not considering this, though, to demonize any people for trying to meet their own basic needs. We recognize and understand that people do what they do to survive, and that includes keeping warm, feeding themselves, and taking care of other human needs. That's why we are proposing that unhoused people in this area get priority for first entry into this interim housing site. So now I'll turn it over to Jen.
Thanks, Jen. This reach of creek, which is the technical term for a stretch of creek or river, requires protection from all the uses that are damaging to a highly sensitive area. The area needs to be protected because, as most of you know that live around, it contains critical water supply infrastructure, endangered species, and other ecological resources. And Valley Water has invested significantly to provide legally required habitat mitigation, and I'll get into that in a little bit on one of these next slides. Okay, so this zone, or the reach of creek, is part of a FEMA floodplain and part of the U.S. Army Corps flood protection project. I think some of you are aware of it. It's part of our upper Guadalupe River flood protection project. And it's critical to maintain this area so that we prevent flooding elsewhere. There are multiple impairments to the water quality at this point in time, and these are tightly regulated, and we're trying to reduce the effects of these. Diazinon, mercury, and of course trash. This reach of river also supports steelhead and Chinook salmon. Hopefully some of you saw them out there this winter migrating. They were around for quite a while. And other native species also use the channel and floodplain for habitat. Valley Water has been required to countywide improve these historically salmonid waterways, and we really only have 11 salmonid creeks throughout the county, Guadalupe River being one of them. And so recently, a few years back, we did install multiple structures and gravel to this channel, and that was for habitat mitigation for these endangered species. We also have protected birds that occur within this area, and I know a lot of you like to walk the trails and look at those birds. And additionally, I mentioned before, this was required habitat mitigation, and the state and federal regulatory agencies that require these types of mitigation are California Department of Fish and Wildlife, the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, and the National Marine Fisheries Service. So the habitat mitigation that was installed in this reach is to basically mitigate for the impacts of the Upper Guadalupe River Flood Protection Project and to address those impacts with these agencies. Next slide, please. Okay, so in addition to the other benefits that we mentioned, there are also important groundwater benefits. This reach does help recharge groundwater, and we have several upstream groundwater percolation ponds. And this groundwater percolates into the ground, and then later it's withdrawn to be used as water supply for our county. And so, we need to protect these groundwater recharge ponds from contamination and water quality impacts that can be associated with encampments, such as bio-waste, hazardous pollutants, and trash. Next slide. So many sources have damaged the environment and water quality in this area, and it's necessary to keep the identified zone, again, the Water Resources Protection Zone that we're proposing, clear of fires, damage to the riparian vegetation, pollution to the water, and also damage and negative effects to the wildlife. And again, this is not about blaming people for engaging in basic survival. If any of us needed to be warm when it was cold or to heat our food and we were living outside, we would be in the same position. So the city is intentionally offering these people who are living within this reach of creek an alternative with this interim housing, and also working with Valley Water to protect this water resource. So we're very happy for the collaborative effort, and I will turn it back over to Omar.
Thank you very much, Jen. Appreciate that. And just one last slide, an update, then we'll go to the public for questions, and I'll stop the share. We will, if there are questions that go past 7:30, we'll stay, and I will take your questions. So please don't worry. We'll take notes and make sure. And if we don't have answers, we will say that, and we will go and get them, or we will tell you when we think we will have them. But just to close out here, a couple more pieces of to note. We mentioned a couple of times today the issue of success, right? That for the over 1,000 people who have entered these interim housing sites, over 70% of them have remained off the street. They've remained housed, either permanently housed or in a temporary way. That's a really important thing. The sort of average benchmark for other types of emergency supply is much lower. It's around 30%. So this really is a smarter approach to this part of the basket of solutions that you heard Mayor Mahan mention at the start. One last point people will want to know, I think I said it, I think you heard Councilmember Foley say it. Our pledge as a city, this is not the last step. It's the beginning of a series of conversations. These interim housing sites will come with citizens or community advisory committees where people can weigh in. We will be looking to go some additional ongoing due diligence around the issues at the site, as well as seeking input from you all and others in the community. And then we're going to council potentially on this June 6th day to actually put this in front of the public in a public meeting and allow the council members to provide feedback. With that, I'm going to stop the share and open for questions. So just please raise your hands. Give me 1 second. I will say I'm going to be taking notes. I'm going to ask my team to take notes. I happen to see Dan first, and then Rudy. So I would say, Dan, how about you go, and then we'll go to Rudy, and I'll just try to keep my eyes on the prize in terms of other questions.
Thank you, Omar. I am hugely excited for this project. I am excited to be able to walk the trails without a safety concern, without blight going on back there. I've actually, when I first heard about this, I went and visited some of the other EIH sites, and they really do live up to what you guys are saying. They're clean. They're, not noisy. They look like great neighbors. I think this site is just, it's an ideal location. I think I'm excited about it. I really appreciate the wisdom and scalability of aligning the incentives that, we're not just putting this site in. There's an actual trade-off of benefit for the local community that it comes with this. We're not going to have the camping. It's not just this site being added. It is actually going to solve the camping for us. As part of the incentive for us in participating in kind of the global solution for the city, we have this, local benefit for us that there's no encampment happening there. I think that it just makes tons of sense. So kind of two questions I'll leave you with around that, besides just the applause and thumbs up on the whole project, is how soon in the process of the build out, how soon do we get that environmental protection zone benefit? And is it going to be memorialized into the contract of the land use that the land is being used on condition that this is one of the conditions that this must also be part of that?
Those are great questions, Dan. Thank you for the comments. Tiffany, I just want you to know I saw your hand go up as well. So after I go to Rudy, I'll go to you. But to take those questions in turn, there's still quite a bit of a process to do the additional due diligence, design, continue to work with. We'll have to potentially go to council, get city council to vote that this is an appropriate next step. Negotiate with Valley Water around that water resource protection zone. And what we would be doing is essentially, as part of that negotiation, is both the site and the water resource protection zone as part of that overall negotiation. And I want to be really, really clear. I understand Dan's perspective, and just for everybody's awareness, that water resource protection zone, I mean, Jen laid out lots of environmentally specific issues. And we are looking, what we come to council with will be for the people who are in that water resource protection zone. This is an option. We'll work with our parties at the county, so that with our partners at the county and others, so that they have other options as well, as this might not be the one. There may be people who are already eligible for other housing options. And so we will pledge, usually these take at least a year or so, maybe hopefully we can do it faster, but we'll pledge in that time to really commit to trying to find solutions for folks that are there, either in the EIH or otherwise. So, and then real quick, the other question is, I guess, yes, it would be memorialized. iPhone Frank, I see you as well. I'll get you after Rudy and Tiffany. It would be part of the lease negotiation, Dan. So that's the answer to that second question. Rudy, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Omar. I applaud the effort, and I think it is a pretty good location for it. But I do have a couple of different questions, and one's really broad, and then the other one is specific to this site. So I'm just curious about, usually a lot of, we're getting a lot of housing built, low-income housing in the different areas, and a lot of that focus is on things around transportation hubs and that sort of thing. So that area is sort of locked away. And I'm just curious if there has been any thought towards transportation for those folks in and out. How are they going to get access to light rail and that sort of thing? And then the second part to my question is much more broad. And you just mentioned county, but I am curious about those different relationships between the county and even the state in tackling this problem.
Yeah, thanks for those questions, Rudy. I'll take them in turn. One of the things that we do, so if we could only use sites that were like across the street from a light rail station or across the street from a bus line, we'd really be hemmed up, right? Because if you think about our city, there would be all these neighborhoods, all parts of the city where there are unhoused folks we wouldn't be able to put resources. So what we end up doing to address that transportation issue when we can is we build in essentially shuttle type subcontracts into the provider agreements. We essentially create space for the providers, to whoever, like the social service providers, to be able to help people get transported to their doctor's appointments, to their stores and things like that. So that's typically when we don't have an immediate light rail. That's one of the ways that we do it. I would say, just for everybody's awareness, people who experience homelessness have a much higher rate of mobility impairments and physical disabilities. And so part of our challenge that we have to also think through when we're doing this is, how do we create opportunities for people who might be in a wheelchair or have an amputation to still be able to get where they need to go? So that's the answer to that question.
Omar, I have just a little bit to add if you want me to, really briefly too. Bicycle transportation has been a big part of people living in these locations. We provide bike storage capacity, racks and that type of thing. And we've had to add more in a number of our communities. So people are utilizing, bicycle transportation as well. And there is VTA bus lines, and the Chinua station, not too far away, but it's in the area. Other sites have been a little bit even more remote than this.
And thank you for that, Jim. And Rudy, I will answer your second question just for everybody else. Ray, I saw your hand go up. I made a note, so I'll get you after Tiffany and iPhone Frank. But just for everybody's awareness, this is scheduled to go to 7:30. If we have hands that are still up, we'll go past 7:30. We'll make sure to make ourselves available. This isn't a one-shot deal in terms of thoughts. Some of you might want to sleep on it and you have a question, over the weekend or something. We want to try to make it accessible so that you can get your questions answered and ask different types of things. Rudy's second question was really about our partners at the county and the state. And I have to say, I've worked in different parts of the state. I mentioned I only joined here last year. I have found Santa Clara County to be a really good partner in this work. We have had several opportunities where we co-create, co-collaborate on helping people get into different levels of care and supportive housing. And so they are a partner at the table. They were a big part of creating that community plan. There's always opportunities for us to do more together. And I think that we're all interested in that. I want you to know that they have been open and engaged every time that we reached out to say, how do we do more together to help people? So and then on the state front, we're doing work with the state right now. They are releasing some more funds. And what we're really trying to do, even with opportunities like this, is braid those funds together to put them to maximum use. So the state's efforts are we can always use more, frankly, especially recurring resources that are ongoing. Any small business owner or large business owner knows it's real hard to make a meaningful choice when you only get money once. You really need to have that reliability. So we're trying to encourage that piece as well. So those are the answers, Rudy. I'm going to move on because Jill, I saw you as well.
Thank you very much, Omar.
Yeah, absolutely. So first I'm going to go back, Tiffany.
Yeah, I was curious about from an enforcement perspective of the no camping zone, how that's going to be managed, because as soon as they started developing the property behind the creek, we've lived here for 13 years. And once they started developing it, there has been a camper behind my house consistently without fail every day since then. We have people, we have problems. We have a lot of problems with vandalism. We had arrows shot at our house recently. We recently had our solar panels destroyed by rocks that they threw. So I'm curious to know what will be done to keep them from you'll add a nice place, but then how are you going to keep people from camping?
Yeah, thank you for that, Tiffany. And for those that weren't here at the outset, what Tiffany is talking about is the Water Resources Protection Zone that would be adjacent to this interim housing. If you missed the presentation slides, this recording and those slides will be posted online, so you can go back and take a look. That Water Resource Protection Zone will create a barrier or a prohibition on a number of things that might be damaging to the water or to the vegetation, et cetera, including camping, but also, fires or trash or different types of things that might be harmful to the environment. That's the sort of real impetus there. And what we're going to need to do, Tiffany, is we don't have this part, frankly, all the way worked out today, but as part of the negotiation process and after it potentially goes to council and we start chatting with Valley Water, we'll figure out what is the process. I can tell you that in other parts of the city, the city of San Jose works with Valley Water to sort of co-share the resources to enforce certain trail patrols and things of that sort. So there is a precedent in San Jose. I want to say that, and this is important, I think, for everybody, that, we want to do good, thoughtful work that is good for people who are unhoused, that is good for members of the housed community, it's good for everybody. And our pledge is, we may not get everything right every time, every moment, but we have to keep moving forward and really try and listen. And so when we set up a community advisory committee, we'll create a space for people to help understand what's actually happening. As we get going, Tiffany, so that, to your point, what is it happens in practice versus the design. So that's something that's in our minds as well. So I hope that sort of answers the question. We are working towards that one. I'm going to go to iPhone Frank. No, you're muted. See if I can unmute you, maybe. Let's see here. I'm going to try to unmute you, iPhone Frank, if I can get up here. See if that worked. There we go.
Got it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you, Omar. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I agree with a lot of the previous commenters. I'm probably the nearest residents to the proposed site. I'm 200 yards away from them. They're right across the Burke Pond from me. And I would be in favor of it as long as there's going to be security there and we won't have to continually report on, every other week fires or someone shooting into the pond during broad daylight. But my question is this, and I think probably is too soon to ask, just about what kind of time frame are we looking at as far as inception to this thing getting online? And number two, as someone else asked, because there is going to be this water resource protection zone, are the people existing in that zone now, are they going to have first shot to go into this site, or is how will the city determine who's going to have access to it first?
Yeah, thanks for those questions, Frank. And Kristen, I saw your hand go up as well, so I put you in the queue after Ray, Daniel, and Jill. So I'll say, Frank, the first one, these things vary quite a bit in terms of the amount of time that they take. I think we as staff and probably your electeds would echo a desire to get them done as quickly as possible. But we have a number of sort of steps in the process. We got to get to council, et cetera. I think you at earliest, we're probably talking more than 9 months from now before you would see something there. Just to give you a short end, it's probably longer, but we'll see. Right, there's some real energy and motivation to try to go. I think the question about you had. I'm sorry, I wrote down the first part, Frank, but I seem to have the inception. And what was the second part of the question? I'm sorry.
Well, I asked, are the people that are currently encamping in the protected zone, all the way from the end of the perk pond, to all the way up to the fish ladder over by the light rail station, or will they be the first occupants of this proposed site?
It's a great question, Frank. Thank you for that. Yeah, yes is the short version is that our proposal, what we're going forward to here to the community and then ideally to council, is exactly that. Is that we would say for people who are in this area, that's who we want to work with, and we have a process of developing what's called a by name list to understand who the individual people are by their actual name and their actual needs, and then working with our partners at the county and otherwise to match them to solutions, because not everybody there will need this. We might be able to help them find something else. A lot of people actually do end up reconnecting with family and that sort of thing, but they will have our proposal is that the people that will be most directly in that water resource protection zone would have the first opportunity for these sites, and actually would need to take them or actually go to some other location out of that zone. So thanks for that question, Frank. I'm going to go to Ray, and just iPad Deborah. I saw your hand go up too, so I got you down. Ray.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity, and just want to also say I appreciate the proposal. This is like the most common sense thing that I've heard so far since I've lived here. I also back up to the Guadalupe, and moved in here about 2018, and I've also had encampments behind my house causing trouble for majority of the time that I've lived here. So I think this makes a lot of sense, and I really feel like it hinges on the enforcement of the no camping and no cooking and such. And so really just more curious, and I know maybe you don't have the specifics yet, but for me as a resident, I'd really like to know the specifics of how that enforcement will actually work, namely because prior to the current way Valley Water deals with the area, when they did abatements before, they would take, like, we would have to call in and we would have to be proactive as residents, and then it would take a while and they would come in and abate people, and they would just put their belongings right there and they would just come right back. And so it sounded like it just didn't work before. And so I just want to make sure that we have a plan to actually make it work the way that it's described, because I think if what you've proposed could be achieved, that would be great for everybody.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ray. A couple of things I'll say. One is, so we've been as a city partnering with Valley Water when there's an abatement to be done. So sometimes it's city people that are out there, we're doing it together. And I think one of the challenges in general that this is attempting to address is if people don't have a place to go, when they get told to move from like place X, right, they what are they supposed to do, right? It's a catch-22 that's bad for everybody. I mean, so what we're trying to do with this interim housing, and as one of your colleagues, one of your neighbors said, who has gone and visited them, and I will say, I think we probably will be looking at how do we do an interest list for people who might want to see one of the existing ones. But I would say that part of what's different, I think, is that we're offering people a place where they can actually go, that has security, that has services, that has peace, right? And they don't have to worry, and neighbors don't have to worry. And so that's part of what we're trying to do. But then again, just to reiterate on the like how to manage that water resources protection zone, part of what we would really be talking about as we negotiate the lease with our partners, when we get to that point of chatting with Valley Water, is how do we do that sort of in concert? And I described another part of the community where we currently work with Valley Water in a partnership that's proactive around the trails. So there's precedent for that option. But what we really want to do is make sure that we're also providing people a meaningful other place to go. So, as I said earlier, I want to be really clear that I speak with this conviction, Jim and I and our colleagues, right? Because we do this every day. We're really committed to trying to make this difference for everybody, for the whole community, people who are unhoused and neighbors who are housed. But we don't have all the answers, and we don't want to pretend to you that, oh, this is, magic and everything's going to be sunshine and roses. What we can pledge to you is that we're going to be committed to the same type of thing in the video I showed earlier about a well-maintained, well-thought-out, trauma-informed center where people can get what they need and move on to their permanent solution. And we're going to work with our partners around that water resources protection zone because it's such a hugely insensitive environmental space. We're going to stay on at 7:30. There's still several hands up. And so I just wanted folks to know, you don't have to worry. But that's that one. And then I'm going to go to Daniel next. Daniel Sanders.
Yep, I'm here. Hey, so thanks for taking the time. I got 3 quick questions. One, right now in the design phase here, are these housing units, they're 1 story under consideration. Is there, at least from what I've seen, looks like the schematics on the video, is there anything that's going to prevent these from becoming like a 2, 3, 4, 5 story tower, right, going forward? I think that's a very different story than having sort of like 1 story sort of housing back there. Now there's going to be essentially 100 units at a proposed dog park. I'm wondering in the design phase if there's any sort of noise abatement, fences, trees, things like that to sort of keep the neighborhood sort of at a reasonable decibel level, since my property is sort of right across the creek from the proposed site. And then finally, I think it's more of a comment than a question. I echo many of the other concerns. It's not just about security at that site; it's increasing security presence of the surrounding sort of water resources protection zone as well, so that the overall security benefits, for the people who are put into these or have a chance to go into these sites also translates into the surrounding community. But I'm so interested in some of the design aspects, like I said, those first 2 questions about the proposed site.
Absolutely. So I'm going to take one of them. I'm going to hand the other one to Jim. What we're proposing to go forward to the council, potentially, after this meeting and maybe other dialogues that happen, is 96 units. And one of the important distinctions is because we're going forward with 96 units, which is essentially a 1 story footprint. Whenever you go up, it's an order of magnitude different. We're talking about foundations and things that are not on the table. So we're not going to council to propose anything above that 96 unit threshold, which is that 1 story footprint. The exact configuration may differ in terms of how the 1 story is placed, but you're not going to be looking at a 4 or 5 story tower of interim housing at that location. And then Jim, can you talk a little bit about the potential for abatement?
Happy to do that. So in terms of what these types of communities typically have, there is a surrounding perimeter fence, usually in the 6 to 8 feet range. We've used redwood, we've used kind of decorative steel, those types of things. So it's a secure facility. We always have a security office where people enter and exit. To be able to go into the community, you need to be a registered participant and resident who lives there. We have, as Omar mentioned earlier, we have rules. So we have quiet hours from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. At our other communities, I've been to them, numerous times. The decibel level is always been, quite low, and seem to be a pretty good neighbor all the way around. Like, does that cover?
Yeah, I think so. Sorry, Jim.
Okay.
I just noticed
Yep.
both Karen and Brian's hands go as well. So I'm going to keep going down my list. The screen says Jill.
Yeah, that's my wife's name. My name is Bob. Her name
Bob.
popped up on the Zoom. Just for a little reference, we've been here for 20 years, and when we first moved in, there was zero people behind us. And starting, I don't know, 10 years ago or whenever it was, that's when they started popping up. And then as you can see, right, well, you can't see, but you know, just looking out the window, there's easily 5-6 tents just right outside our window right now. So that's just kind of what we've been dealing with. Security has been talked about by everybody, and that's obviously going to be key moving forward. It's not just for us, which we've been inundated with concerns from screaming, you know, fires in the campgrounds, or that's what I'm calling them, exploding, you know, barbecue canisters. I've had to call the cops on people who sounded like they were going to threaten to kill each other, honestly. But I also want to make sure that this property, which I'm okay with, because obviously we want everyone to be somewhere, but with that being said, if we have a facility like this that's where everyone goes to, that would be great. And I want to make sure that's safe over there. Will there be a manager on site? What if these people refuse to leave when asked to go? Who's going to do the enforcement? San Jose Fire PD or San Jose Water? Who does that? Can we call them and have them arrive the next day? Hey, a campsite set up. And also, what was the last question I had? But yeah, basically that's kind of it.
Okay.
Those are the things we want to make sure that happen. If you can address some of that, I'm curious to know. Oh, my last question is, provided hypothetically, if this thing lasts until, you know, a year, let's say it gets built in a year, hypothetically, or it never gets built, does that mean everyone is allowed to stay there as of right now and nobody's being asked to leave? Or is there still an ongoing effort to move some of these people out now? And that's all I have asked, but I am in favor of this program so far from what I'm hearing about it. I'll take your answers.
Thanks, Bob. So I'm gonna go a little bit quicker to make sure we can try to get other folks. And again, it's not a one and done. The short answer is yes, there'll be managers on site. We end up putting out a request for proposals, and there are some pretty seasoned professionals who do this work in our other sites to help people in a way that works for those people, and also is a really a good neighbor. I think the question of the enforcement of that water resources protection zone that we mentioned, and again, for those that joined late, there's a presentation deck. This recording will be online as part of the negotiation of the lease with the property owner, Valley Water. We'll actually be working out those kinds of details, right? How do you do it in concert? There is precedent in other parts of the city of San Jose where we've partnered with Valley Water to say on trail patrols to try to address certain types of behaviors or challenges that happen on trails. So there's some precedent for that. I think we're going to try to drive with, hey, here's a good, peaceful, safe, therapeutic option right there that you can use and encourage people there, and then understand that part of it is they're not going to be able to be in the area that's just adjacent to it anymore. So I can't really get too far on the hypothetical. There's 5 other hands, and I would say, you know, our private property owners have a whole bunch of abilities. We as a city try to work with Valley Water, try to work with the unhoused, but the reality is, as some of your neighbors have said, when there's no place for people to go, even when we go out and say, hey, we're sorry, this is not a place that you can be, they don't have to go that far to be in a place that we're doing the same thing again. So this is an attempt by, you know, us as a city to be like, well, let's do it differently. Let's really work hard to try to do something that will help holistically. So that's not a perfect answer, but it's really the truth of the dynamic when we don't have places for people. So that's what we're trying to fix here. So thanks for that, Bob. I hope that got the 3 of those. I want to go to Kristen, who's been waiting patiently.
There you go. Hi. Yeah, I was looking at the protection, the water resources protection zone map, and I see in the Blossom Valley Lake area, by the 2 Highway 85s, that only part of that peninsula is protected. The tip being not green. Is that a detail that was just not put on the map, or is that not going to be a protected area?
I think the way that I would say this is the exact final contours will be something that we would need to work out with our, like, if we get to council, we have this meeting, we have other questions that come up over the next few days, we answer those, we go to the council and they say, yes, we want to proceed. Part of that proceeding is like, it's Valley Water's property, so we
Right,
want to
right.
work with them on like what makes sense. And so I think there's additional opportunities to refine the contours.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
And then we'll go to iPad, Deborah. Oop. See if I can.
Got out
okay.
of mute.
There we go.
Hi, my husband and I have lived here over 2 decades, and we walk that path almost every day when we aren't walking somewhere else. And my concern, my questions are similar to other people's. And one of them was like, you know, why, what Kristen just asked, why the percolation pond is all I've ever heard. I've never heard of Blossom Valley Lake as a name, but why?
We're gonna fix that. We're gonna fix that, Deborah.
I know
sorry.
it's more lovely than the percolation pond. But there's, you know, a little park nearby and other areas that, you know, what's to prevent, it's similar, what's to prevent people to keep moving around to those areas that are just adjacent on the other side of the lake. And plus, I've seen tents just on the western side of the lake as well. I don't know if they're there now because we don't walk that way right now with the gate closed. Plus all the encampments, but I'm really relieved that you're taking this site seriously, because all the trash going into the percolation pond and the amount of wildlife has gone down. We don't see the seniors from the assisted living center walking in the area anymore like they used to be able to get out because they don't consider themselves safe. So I really appreciate these efforts, but and the wildlife is really diminished. So I'm really appreciate it. So mainly a lot of these questions have been answered by by the presentation and your answers to other people's questions. But my concern was like, Kristen, why isn't it cover more of that lake area?
Yeah, and Deborah, I think as part of that conversation, the subsequent conversation, if we get there with Valley Water, I think remember that this is we're protecting the water resources around this area, and so we'll work with Valley Water to say, well, what does achieve that in a meaningful way around this area, and that's the driver. So I would say just give us some time to get into that phase of it. Okay?
Into the second phase of the areas around it.
Well, I know. Oh, I'm sorry. I mean to get into that phase of this journey of conversation. Like, it's Valley Water's property, so we would ultimately, if the city council says yes, go forward, then we would start negotiate. Where there'd be some initial logistics and due diligence, but ultimately it would involve a negotiation with the property owner around what are the exact contours. Like I was saying to Kristen. So you just
but I guess then my question would be, if it's just, and I think it's really important for the water resource area, because it's really been tragic what's been happening there. And it's tragic for the people, of course, that are homeless. But it's just like, if you're just focused on that area, what if they just move to the little park next door, which
Yeah.
there is one? Is that area going to be covered by enforcement as well? Or is it already? Yeah.
So Deborah, I guess I'll answer it this way. Part of doing what we're talking about together is creating an opportunity for 96 people, and then it won't just be 96 and they stop, because it's not permanent. We're trying to help people move on to the next thing, right? So part of it is creating a place for people to be that is different than where they are. But the truth, if we're really just, cards on the table, there's still an awful lot of our city where people don't have any other place to go, and some of them are close to you. So our ability to get this right and prove to you and to the unhoused folks that are there that this can work and this is a viable option, like it has shown in the other ones, is part of what we need to do, so that other neighbors will say, yep, they said they would do this. They had all the pieces that they said, and now we want one. We're open to it here as well. And the more of these options we get, the more we support the permanent solutions that our supportive system is working on. That's what we'll do to get there. So
Okay,
Deborah,
well, I'm not sure you understand my question, which is
Okay.
just the area really adjacent to it. Will people who move, if they move from that camp, their camp to just the little park nearby, will they be mandated to move to the new facility? Is really what my question is.
oh, I'm sorry. So I would say
It wasn't clear enough.
sorry about that. So the real flat answer is this. Wherever the water resource protection zone ultimately ends up being, that will be the area where people are not going to be able to camp or cook or throw trash. And if they move outside of that area, like, and not accept the interim housing or other solutions, like there isn't a mechanism unless it falls under a different set of laws. And I don't have the park laws with me, but so there will be places that people could theoretically go outside, but still close by. So we can't promise that this is going to solve all the
Okay.
issues. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your letting me know that
Yeah.
there isn't a clear solution for that right yet. But the area with the water is so important.
Thanks for that, Deborah. I'm going to go to Dave. And Cheryl, I did see I got your name as well. Go ahead, Dave.
Hi, thanks for all this presentation. So it may not be obvious. Everybody, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. But I wanted to make sure they are allowed, the people who are residents there would be allowed to be there 24 hours a day. They wouldn't get kicked out during the day, so they don't have to go out into the neighborhoods. I think that's a yes or no question. I'm pretty sure the answer is yes. The second thing is, tell us about the community advisory committee. I know you have success at other sites, and what our access will be as a neighborhood or a neighborhood association with the local management. Those are my questions.
Yeah, thank you for those. The answer to your first question is pretty straightforward. It is not a like, people don't have to leave like during the day and go somewhere. They can stay there. In fact, we want them to stay there and get the support and services and things that are available, or go to work or whatever. Lots of people, unfortunately, who are unhoused need to work. So that's that answer. I think that the community advisory committees, which is your second question, is the level of access. For some of the other sites, they literally have monthly and bi-monthly meetings directly with what is effectively the management company, the social service provider that provides the management and oversight. So before we even get to having a site, there's a whole process of getting neighbors who want to be part of that community advisory committee, and then getting them together and creating an opportunity for them to interact with the service provider, I think is your question, is that level of access. So it is right now, those meetings happen, and you could, if you wanted to, we could get you connected to one of the other community advisory committees so that you could kind of see what it's like.
Great, thanks.
Okay. Is it Karen or Karen?
Karen's fine.
Okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So bear with me. I'm actually talking on behalf of almost 100 people that live in the Ivana Almaden apartments and the 2 condo complexes that are on each side. So we are literally, 20 feet from the fence line to the perk ponds. And so what some of our questions are, one is there a plan in the interim? And I don't know if some of these questions might be too soon in the planning phase, but just within the last 2 weeks, about 5 or 6 new tents have come up literally across the street from our buildings. And one of the couple tents is 20 feet away from a family that has small children that play, right on one sidewalk, and across the street are the encampments. Down the way, about another 5 or 6 are now in front of another large apartment building, and there's elderly, additional children, disabled, and they're scared of now the growth of the encampments directly across the street. So I don't know what could be done in the interim to try to at least not let anyone else build more tents. But then another concern is, and I think I know where this plot is, I believe that there's already a somewhat large encampment there, that when the construction starts, would they potentially then be moving to the perk ponds to stay until it's built and then move into the portables or whatnot? Like, kind of concerned with how it's actually going to work out. Because another really sad concern is I've talked to neighbors that want to sell their homes that they have been in because of the situation. And unfortunately, when they go to list the property, they're not even going to get proper value because no one's going to come in and buy. And I know we're in a situation that we're just starting this, but these are just some of the concerns that what can we do then also to help this move along faster? Like, I can go out and help clean, you know what I mean? There's people that could be handy to help build or do things, and like, what can be done so that everyone is kind of feeling safe and secure and try and get the project completed.
Yeah, Karen, thanks for that question. I appreciate it. We got about 8 more minutes before we get kicked out. I'm still, Brian and Cheryl, I see it. So I'm going to try to make sure we get to you. I would say a couple of things. One, Karen, I'd be happy to follow up, and Dan, I see you too. I'll be happy to follow up. This meeting is the community meeting about the proposal for this potential site. There are some other venues for conversations about, like, well, what do we do right now? And we can do those in parallel. I don't want to dismiss what you're asking. But I would say it's a different set of circumstances, and so there's some folks I would want to maybe connect you to, or even just we'll take that you've shared this and let our folks know. Frankly, part of this conversation we're having is to create options for those folks. I would say, so I don't have a, like, what are we going to do tomorrow answer at the moment. It's still in the early stages. Here's what I would say about the other questions. Actually, it's a good question that we've got to go internally and do some work on, which is the question about what happens during construction. That's a ways off, so we have some time to plan for some alternatives, and that's one of the things that we're going to have to make sure that we do. So I'll just tell you honestly, as we sit here, I don't have a magic answer, but it's one that it's a question that you deserve an answer to before we get there. So I said these things I mentioned earlier, these things can take 9 months to a year or more. So we've got time, but we need to do it thoughtfully to be able to answer that kind of question, because that's not helpful for anybody, including the unhoused people who would be moved during construction. So thank you for that question. I know those were not the most satisfying answers, but it's what I've got now, and it's the most
No, I
honest.
totally understand. Totally understand.
Brian.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick question on, if you know yet, on how the selection process will go, in the sense of who the folks will be that would be selected to live there. As an example, I mean, would there be a focus on encampments like Branham Avenue to both clean that up and to get folks in a safe and healthy place to live? And so I'm just wondering how that will be done, if you know yet.
Yeah, so the as far as we've gotten this far is that the people who are camping around this site or on where we propose, like, the first selection cut is we want to create an opportunity for people who are there. We're talking about this water resource protection zone, and to protect it, we need those people to have some other place to be. And so that's the first order. And then the question becomes, in all of the communities where we have these, Scott, I see you too, we'll go to you as well. We have till 8. So Brian, the short version is, first order is sort of neighborhood driven. And then we start talking about maybe moving also in the community, but less immediate. I think, based on my having gone out there a few times with my colleague, Jim, and with colleagues to talk to people who are unhoused, I think there are, unfortunately, enough people who are suffering and living immediately adjacent that we could probably really fill up those 96 units with a pretty close proximity. So that's where we are now, but we'll keep on that one. Cheryl?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thanks. Just real quick. So I am for this before I ask my question. So I think it's a great idea, but you already have sites up and running. So what are, and you can be very high level about it, what are the restrictions, requirements, and time for the people that move in? So my brother is homeless, so I am quite aware of stuff that goes on out there. And it's all nice to say that everybody is either a family or down on their luck, but that's not all the case with a lot of the drug addicts that are out there, that are young men and young women that actually could go home if they weren't doing drugs and stealing from their families and being abusive. So I'm just curious to know, what's the time limit for these people that are moving into homes that are being paid by the taxpayers, and kind of what are the requirements for them?
Yeah, so a couple of things on that. So one, the sort of specific rules or requirements are part of a shared process for each of the sites. Some of the, so that is the people who have formerly been homeless provide input, the service providers provide input, the community advisory committee that I mentioned earlier provides input, but some of the examples of things are, you know, no illegal items, weapons and things on site, right? As an example of a restriction, right? So that list ends up getting developed in concert, as I just mentioned. So I don't have all of the enumerated sites or rules, because they vary by site. But there is a process for getting there. I would say also on the time, and that's typically we try to get people to we try to work with people so that they can move on within a year and often as little as 6 months of getting onto a site. So part of the service provider's approach is this is not intended to be a destination so much as it is intended to be a place where somebody can sort of get what they need and figure out what that next step is. And we actually see a fair amount of people, which is why over 1,300 people have been able to go through this, even though there's only just around 500 total units. So that's some of those answers, and more to be determined. As I told Dave earlier, we will be sort of connecting potentially folks who want to know about the AC. Cheryl, I want to make sure to give Dan and Scott a chance.
Yep, thank you.
Dan?
Hi. I'll make sure you can hear me. Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. So I joined the meeting while it was in progress due to a prior commitment. So hopefully I didn't miss some of these things. I heard you mention 96 units. And then I heard you mention 96 people, and then back to 96 units. So is this like one person per unit? Or are there going to be, like, if there's couples out there, do they get to go into one of these units? I also heard you mention the word opportunity. So I'm assuming that this means that you will approach these people and say, we have an opportunity for you to go into one of these units. And what happens if they say, well, I don't want to go? What are you going to do with these people? And then lastly, if they do go to these units, and let's say they break the rules, or they break their agreement or whatever, what happens? Are they just simply removed? And do they go back to the streets? Do they go back to the camps? What's going to happen? And one last thing, I really appreciate the fact that you extended this meeting beyond your time. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think we may get kicked out at 8, which is in 1 minute. Scott, my email is my first and last name, omar.passons@sanjoseca.gov. I will happily respond to you tonight if we don't get to your question. Dan, just really quickly, and sorry if we get disconnected, we will post this online. The reference to 96 units and 96 people is in part because they will definitely be 96 units. Whether there will be couples who are allowed to sort of, if the units will be big enough for that, we actually don't know that exact detail yet, because it hasn't gone into design and there are some additional layers. Usually it's one person per unit, which is why I was kind of going back and forth, but I think that will come out in the design phase. And then I think the answer to sort of what happens if people are not following the rules. Well, unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't happen all that often, but sometimes people have to be asked to leave. And they can't stay not just there, but in this case, where there's going to be a water resources protection zone that includes not being able to camp, they won't be able to just go into that water resources protection zone. So Dan, the recording will be live. Oh, good, they didn't kick us out. The reporting will be live probably early next week, so you can see that it includes the whole slide deck, so that you can kind of see all of the backstory. But those are a couple of the answers, and then I think in plain truth, we will be working together with members of this community. What we have found at our other sites is that the vast majority of people who are in these sites are grateful to have an opportunity to sleep with a door they can lock and a bathroom they can use and connection to services and supports. We have a tremendous waiting list. And as the mayor said on the lead-in, we actually see calls for service go down in communities where these interim housing units are located. So we have good data to demonstrate that we're positive neighbors when we do it right. And that's what we're going to try to do, just like with all of the other ones with you. So those are a couple of answers. I'm going to take Scott as the last question of the night. And then I will just say, as I said before, reach out to your council member. If you want, Jim and I to come out and, come to your cul-de-sac or something, and we could potentially find another way to do that. But let me go ahead and take Scott's question.
Hi there. Yeah, glad to bring up the rear here. Thanks for the bonus time. Just curious if you've consulted with any of the businesses in the area, specifically the Hamptons Inn that just refurbished that hotel. Do they share your enthusiasm for this project? And when do they get consulted on this?
Yeah, thanks for that, Scott. I'm going to pass it to Councilmember Foley on this one as the representative of the community. I think she can actually provide some insight there, and then she'll also wrap it up with a few comments, and then we'll let folks go. So, Councilmember Foley.
Omar, great presentation, and thank you so much for extending this so we can hear everybody's questions. That was really important to me to hear what everyone has to say and hear their comments and thoughts. And we did, when notices went out about this meeting, we actually hand delivered them to all the businesses surrounding there, including all of them at Almaden Ranch. That includes the hotel. It also includes the Safeway shopping center, all of those businesses too. We hand deliver to them. I don't know if there's anyone here from those businesses, but we will continue to reach out for them. We haven't heard specifically back from anyone yet, but I'm sure we will start to, and we'll make sure that we go out to them. It is important that we reach out to the businesses too. I think they will be supportive too, because of what we are trying to accomplish here, but we have a long way to go before we get at that phase. But it is important for us to make sure that we hear their concerns and their thoughts as well. So if you have any connections over there, let us know, and we'll be happy to reach out to them. And as a wrap up, thank you so much for everyone being here, for all your thoughtful questions and comments, for your concerns, for your support. There's obviously a lot of information that we still have to settle on. The opportunity to have the water resource protection area is really important. This will go to council, so the city council will have to approve it. And I'm hopeful that we will do just that, but we're not yet ready to bring this forward to city council. It's a work in progress. If you do have any questions about this, please reach out to my office and we'll respond to you as best we can. We are in close communication with Omar and his team on this, and I have driven by and been in that area many times and am aware of the level of unhoused who are living in that area now. And moving into emergency interim housing really is a good solution for this area, and creating the water protection zone makes it really a win-win for both the unhoused and the neighbors. So, but the devil is in the detail, as they say, and there's a lot of details to still work out. With that, thank you so much for spending the time with us. If we have other community meetings, and I'm sure we will, if you would like to meet with us as a small group, a large group, let us know and we'll make those arrangements. Thank you very much for joining us.
Okay, so obviously the interpreters, if you can hear me, have a good night. Thank you very much for staying even a little bit past the 8 o'clock window. I do appreciate it. And then once I'm not actually sure how we, I didn't want to hit the leave button because I didn't want to just disappear all at once.
No, it's fine, Omar. I'll stop the recording now.
Okay, perfect.
Omar's